started in the wrong key there, Dom.
Who cares?
Well, there'll be some musician out there who's going to be like, they started in F sharp.
Sounds like there's a musician in here who's thinking that.
Yeah, probably, sorry. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi!
It's Gregorian Chat.
Yes, another episode of Chatting Gregorian Style.
I was going to try and say our tagline, which I always forget.
What were you going to say this time?
That's why I can't remember.
Gregorian Chat, the podcast that...
Leaves you feeling inadequate. No, I don't know.
Leaves you
It's really
wanting
bad.
more? I
don't know.
Leaves
the
you
podcast.
confused.
Just the podcast. Anyway,
Just the podcast.
today's episode is the Pain Podcast,
We've got
featuring
the podcast.
Pop-Tarts.
Pop-Tarts.
We got some Pop-Tarts, we got some cookies, we got some tea.
Yeah. What tea was it?
It's a turmeric, cinnamon, nutmeg tea.
Cinnamon.
It's rooibos. So, do you want some?
Yeah, I do. I already have some.
I know, because this is your second cup.
Fantastic.
Anyway, we hope you guys are doing well. We know that you're just great fans, great subscribers, great supporters.
Yeah.
So we want to thank you.
Keep doing that. I thought our last podcast went really well, and I thought we'd follow up the pleasure with the pain.
Yeah, I mean,
So much life is
we're sitting in front of a whole bunch of Jasmine eating cookies at home, which is like
I feel like I'm covered in pollen.
decidedly different.
So I'm gonna
That is a pollen.
Yeah, I'm gonna be a pollen 13.
Do you want the s'mores Pop-Tart?
No, I want the other one because I already had a small.
Right, I'll have the s'mores one.
As much as I want more of
cheers.
that,
Anyway, so today's podcast, as Dom said, we did the pleasure podcast. We followed up with a pain podcast. Is it good? It's just kind of hard to do a pain podcast with Pop-Tarts, but anyway.
It's just a alliteration.
So the two things we want to talk about today, okay? Does pain have some kind of purpose? Yes, no. And how do we deal with pain in a good way? Because we will all have pain in our lives.
Yeah.
And, it's good to know these things for when they come around. Anyway, you take over so I can eat this.
Yeah, so I mean, it kind of leads into the problem of evil, but we're going to leave that for someone who's a bit more qualified to talk about it than us. So we're probably going to get someone who's maybe spent 7 years studying theology, commonly known as a priest, to maybe help us and guide us through that one. But I thought we would talk about kind of suffering and stuff like that. I did have a point, but the tasty cinnamon took away from my mind.
I don't know.
But I think suffering, because it's a...
Does it have a purpose?
Does it have a purpose? Yeah, because I mean, I think the non-Christian argument is life sucks, and there's suffering, and there's evil, and it's not good.
Therefore, God doesn't exist.
And I think the Christian argument is very similar, but a tiny bit different. It's like, yeah, evil does exist, suffering happens, and that sucks. So Jesus is like, I'm going to do something about it. And hence, the incarnate Word came to earth, and we get to know him. His name's Jesus, and he's your friend. And I think, and that leads into the problem of evil as well. And so, before Christ, I don't know, maybe that's a bit of a claim, but like... Pre-Christ. It's almost as though suffering...
Pre the incarnation.
Yeah, okay. Suffering, well, it was always the plan. Anyway, without Christ, suffering is meaningless. And it's horrible, and it makes this world look like a terrible, terrible place. And you can see why people who don't believe in God have a massive problem with this. But I've actually been wrestling with this issue a lot recently, because we're in quite a painful time of the church. We've got the abuse scandals going on, and the Cardinal Carrick situation, and then a whole bunch of other people in Germany came forward, like thousands of people.
Just recently?
Yeah.
I don't watch the news, man.
Yeah, you should. Well, I mean, don't, because it's horrible, but you do because it keeps you informed. We should all be informed. And it got me thinking, it's like, how do we come to terms with this? How do we even say, because lots of people are leaving the church because of it, and you shouldn't, because, it's better to leave the church than leave the church, as Father Mike Schmidt says, and I agree with him wholeheartedly. But that's a great, catchy phrase, but where does it leave us with regards to these poor children who are now adults that have had to live with this pain their whole lives? And knowing that Christ, redeems that suffering is the answer. But it's not just... It's like with maths questions. Writing down the answer isn't enough. We need the working.
Right. You need to show that you can do the equation.
Well, because it helps us in our understanding of life.
Definitely. And because I guess when we had this discussion before the podcast, I was kind of saying, well, what is the purpose of pain? And I think you rightly put it that pain didn't have a purpose. You know, there's more just like pain exists in the world, and because of that, you know, it was like, well, Christ then was like, I need to jump in here, and therefore through Christ's suffering, pain doesn't so much, I guess, has a purpose, has a function, which is actually conformity with Christ. So really, really good talk recently from Father Jeremy Pullman at Encounter New Zealand.
Yeah.
Make sure you come along to that. And he talked about salvation history, pretty much.
Yeah.
It was like...
Yeah, I asked him a question, it was like, so what about our glorified bodies? And he was like, okay, so you know Adam and Eve, and then he went on from there.
Yeah. He's like, anyone got any questions? Like, yeah. Anyway, so he talked about salvation history, but he also talked about, you know, where that leaves us from here on in. And in the interim, we're stuck here on earth, and we have to suffer. You know, and that, as Dom said, sucks. It should be called suffering.
Yeah,
but
definitely true.
But basically he was saying, well, Christ actually suffered, and his sacrifice paid for all, but that doesn't mean that we won't suffer. And in fact, in the scriptures it talks about how we need to conform to Christ's suffering, you know, and if we are crucified with him, we will also be raised, and if we are crucified in a death like his, we will be raised in a resurrection like his. And so the interesting thing I think that Father Jeremy talked about was the fact that, you know, well, why then would God create a world in which he knew suffering would come about? You know, it's a really good question. And I think that the scripture that's helped me to see this the most was the one where the Pharisees come to Jesus and say, here's a blind man, or here's a lame man, or something, a man with a defect. And they say, was it his own sin that made him, you know, have this defect, or was it the sin of his parents? And Jesus said, actually, it's neither, because you don't understand. You know, it's neither. It's actually, this man is the way that he is in order that Christ, that God may be glorified. And then Jesus heals him, you know. And so, I guess in a similar fashion, our suffering has a kind of function, which is, a part of that is glorifying God, you know.
Yeah. And
offer it, but only if we offer it up.
Yeah, because like there's this other phrase that I'm really struggling with when I was looking into this topic, and it's like, it's a God permits. He doesn't make evil, but he permits evil. So it's like, okay, I'm not going to do something evil, but something evil will happen if you do this, and I'm just going to allow that to happen. It's like, I mean, how does he permit that? And
he goes out to the suffering permit office.
Yeah, fill out a permit. You know, my permit for my evil. That's what the demons have to go through. It's not a great process. I mean, the bureaucracy and the paperwork.
This is a demonic.
Yeah, demonic red tape. Anyway, so what was I going to say? I'm completely gone. Yeah.
You're saying God permits evil.
He permits evil.
It's a new haircut. Isn't it looking great, by the way?
Yeah. All the source of my powers have gone. I cut off my hair.
Your power comes from the source.
Yeah, I got a bottle of it. I'll back it up.
Try and get some?
Yeah, sure. I'll pass it on to you in a minute. I'll send it in the post. So yeah, God does permit evil. He allows it to happen. And here's the analogy. And again, remember how weak an analogy is. So this isn't an answer, but this is showing us a deeper truth. And you see, like, how, you know, sometimes, like, you'll do something and people say, you know, it's painful, it's horrible, and it's be like, it's character building. You know, you'll grow from it. Yeah, it'd be great.
Fuck it up.
Oh, yeah. Whereas then some people are sort of like, I know, he should never have to go endure pain in his whole life ever, and that's horrible. I can't believe you'd let that happen. It's like, that's kind of what God's doing in a very, very fragile sense with evil. In his permission to evil, it's like, because it is a sanctify. It does have a sanctifying effect, and in that sense, it is not only a little bit desirable. Now, be careful with that, because we shouldn't be looking to suffer. But it is also, somewhere where we can actually find joy,
right?
Because Christ Himself entered into suffering, and then we can find Christ there.
I think this is a great place, and to tie this in with our last podcast, which was pleasure, and you have the two extremes. You have the Stoic and the addict, or the mystic, right? And so, thinking about pain and suffering in this way may lead us to be like, oh, okay, well then the key is to basically become a Stoic and be like, no, if there's suffering, we need to endure it, and in fact it's good for us, so we should avoid pleasure and seek out the suffering, which is also not the key. But yeah, it could just be a good way of...
Yeah, because also,
dovetailing,
like, then there's the whole thing of you don't want to put our Lord God to the test. Saying, like,
Right.
God will provide for me, or I will give more glory to God if I start, flagellating and beating myself. Like, no.
Right.
There is enough flatulence in the world.
Farting never helps.
It always helps. Anyway, your life is hard enough. We don't need to seek out struggle. But what we need to do is we need to be aware of our struggle and struggle of others, because there's two sides to this. Because I was thinking about this the other day. It's like whenever a prayer is answered for us, it's not just happening to us, because we're in the world.
Right.
So if something good happens to me, it affects the people around me. And if it's something like praying for a good day's weather, and then I get a good day of weather, like on my birthday, for example, we can go out to the beach. It's like, that's not just happening to me. That's happening to everybody.
Yeah, you're like, thank God he did that for me.
And so,
maybe.
when something bad is happening to someone, someone around us, there is also an obligation for us to stand up and join with them in that suffering. And that's not like saying, oh, there's a homeless person, that's it, I'm selling all my stuff, giving all my money to charity, I'm suffering with this homeless person. But maybe, okay, I'm going to take a sacrifice of myself today for that person.
Right.
And then in that, prayer is answered in a deeper way. Like, and this, we get into like abstinence and fasting here.
So what you're saying is it's not necessarily the nature of the suffering, but it's the way that we approach it, our attitude towards the suffering, and the way in which we are meant to offer it up, that matters. And I think this kind of leads us to, well, then dealing with pain, because we all have it. How do we do that? What's a good way? And I actually had a quite profound thought, the other day. It was profound for me, I think, because of the things I've been thinking about in my life recently.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not a very charitable person. I feel like...
I've noticed that.
I feel like I'm... if you see someone on the street and you're driving past and you're like, oh, they fell off their bike, and then I see someone's like stopping to help them, we're like, oh yeah, they've got it. That person will sort them out, kind of thing. I'm not necessarily compelled to stop the car and go and check just in case they're not, Anyway, so I was driving and I was like, well, how do I be more charitable? And I thought, well, the first step, at least for me, in overcoming or to becoming more charitable, to becoming more Christ-like, is to accept that people are going to inconvenience you, and that life is going to inconvenience you, but especially people, in the sense that if you are always really precious about your life and what stuff goes good and bad, the things that are going right for you and the stuff that's just not in order, then if it doesn't go right, then you're always going to be up in arms, and your first reaction will be like, God, why why is this happening to me again? I thought I just suffered from this, and like this past year medically for me has been really like that. It's a lot of things piled on top of each other. But in relation to interactions with other people, I feel like for me that was a quite a revelation. It's like, well, accepting that if you are actually wanting to help other people and be a witness to Christ, then you will be inconvenienced. It's easy to be involved in a charitable exchange where you give money to a homeless person. He's like, man, you're the best, and thank you so much. And you both are like, oh, I feel really good about that. And he's like, I feel really good about that. I'm going to eat that. But like, it's not as easy when you give money to a homeless person who's like, swears at you, or you get that kind of abuse, and you never feel nice about it then. Anyway, trying to tie that in with pain and kind of thinking, what are some other practical...
Well, I think it's also
things?
like, and I think you touched on this a bit, it's like, being aware of the temptation that, the devil has in mind for us, of focusing our eyes on the bleakness of the world, of your current situation, of like, oh, I've got no money, I live in a terrible flat, and I'm hungry, and it's cold, and it's wet, and I don't like life.
My pants are wet again.
Yeah, again. I'm stood in the soil over here. Anyway, the devil tries to keep our eyes focused on the horrible stuff. So it's like, I don't have enough money, my life sucks. But our eyes are to be focused upwards. And then you don't notice the suffering. And it says in the scriptures, they will know you by the way you love one another, by your joy. And like that joy in suffering. That joy no matter what. And it's like, these guys are like the poorest of the poor, but they're happy.
Yeah, they have no reason to be happy, according to the world. It's like,
and so like the devil keep our eyes focused on the things that we can't change, But if we keep our eyes focused on eternity, so that it can affect our present moment, then I think that helps with dealing with the pain. It's kind of like, you know what, there is more to life than this right now. And so there is an element of just dealing with it. I was talking to my spiritual director the other day about the mass, and he says there's two elements to the mass. There's the physical and like the more spiritual, like intellectual. Of like we can focus on what's actually happening and contemplate that and be enriched by it. But sometimes we get to mass and we're really tired or we're really sick and we're not really paying attention. And that's where the physical comes in. The kneel, sit, stand, hands together, eyes closed, bowing. It's like, because that prompts us, like, oh yeah, I remember now. Now I'm in mass. So like, these things are essential. And so like, that comes around to this whole suffering thing as well. Like, have those things in our life that remind us, oh, there's more to life than this suffering moment. Definitely.
And I think one of those things, big one, would be friends. Having good friends who can actually hold you accountable, and a friend who can be like, man, that's really rough what you're going through. I can understand or I can't understand, but I'm here for you, kind of thing. But also friends who will hold you accountable and say, hey, look, you're suffering. Why do you think that is? And it may just be that there is no reason. It may just be you were hit by a car, while you're crossing the road. But it may be that you were hit by a car because you were drunk.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk in the podcast soon about drunkenness.
Yes.
But anyway, but it's better to be able to share your pain with someone close to you, your family or a friend, rather than just be like, I'm going to go out on my own, and thinking it's like Christian thing to do is just to suck it up, hold it in and endure it, and grin and bear it. Instead, it's better to make sure that you are sharing the load a little bit with someone else rather than turning to a vice, rather than, and I feel like when I'm suffering, I often see it as an excuse, a reason to go easy on myself.
Yeah.
To be like, you know what, I am gonna, buy this pie or something. What? You know why? Because I failed my exam. Something like that. And it's easy to feel like you kind of are owed a treat.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with treating yourself every now and again. But I think, to add to the friendship thing, it's like having good friends around you is a good thing. Engaging with the sacraments. Because we listened to Theology of the Body retreat a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things is the sacrament of penance, or confession as it's commonly known, it's not just about I did this wrong, I did this wrong, I did this wrong, sorry. It's more of a case of like, I'm really struggling right now and I need grace. I need you, God. Can you help me out? Yeah. And that has led me to these wrongs. And so of buying too many pies, or spending too much money on pie. And so engaging with the sacraments of penance, having a spiritual director, or just someone that can hold you accountable, going to mass, praying a rosary. These are very tangible things, because the Catholic Church understands that we're as humans, we're very tangible. We need physical things. So engage with those things, and as in a prayer of, I need help right now. So that's sort of the physical things that can maybe help us out, more practical things that can help us out when we're in that suffering moment.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, I'm sure everyone can think back on something that was painful in the past, which they've worked through, and now, I mean, maybe still something that needs to be worked through, in which case you probably need to get some prayer for it or something. But a lot of the time we can look back and think, I learned something from that, or you can laugh at it, and that's okay. And then in fact that's great if you've kind of moved past it. And so definitely I think something that I've kept in mind is having an eternal perspective. Trying to have that all day, every day. Whenever something comes up, it's like, even if we lost the game, or I lost the key to the house, or it's something that's like, okay,
I didn't get my
I could freak out about it, I could have a big hissy fit, or if it's important, you should sort it out.
Definitely.
The keys for your house. But don't let it ruin your life. And think eternally. It's like, well, you know what? At the end of the day, not at the end of the day, but at the end of my life, the goal is that I get to heaven. So
yes, and let us all help each other get to heaven, and let us endure our suffering with an eternal perspective.
Wow, that's really hard.
Yeah, I think I put too much in, but that's what happened.
Well, thanks for joining us for this podcast. We will see you next time. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe.
God bless. Hey guys, thanks for watching the podcast. I've got good news. It just got a whole lot easier to search for us online.
All you got to do is search Gregorian Chat into YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, iTunes, and Player FM for those who are on Android.
Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. See you later. God bless.